when I was 9, my brother was 13, we went hunting with my father and Uncle Dell, and we went out to Uncle Floyd's, and there were 2 other men, and Uncle Floyd took us quail hunting. You could hunt on any farm if you stopped and talked to the farmer and asked permission, and Uncle Floyd knew everybody, but it was just kind of appropriate to stop and talk. So we stopped at a farmhouse at some point in the day, and Carl and I did not hunt. We picked up the quail, and we followed behind the hunters, and Uncle Floyd had the dogs, and they would shoot a quail and we'd pick it up, carry it, and at that time you didn't hunt till you were 14. That was kind of the time when you get your gun and get to go hunting. And so we didn't think anything about it. We were happy to be able to go along. So we stopped at a farmhouse, and the farmer came out, and he said, you know, by the way, I have a gun here that I've had for some time that I don't use. I'll sell it to you for $10. And he brought out an old single shot 12 gauge shotgun. Well, it was kind of, you know, it wasn't, it was good quality metal. It wasn't rusted, but it was discolored. It was, and the stock was kind of beat up, and it was really an old gun. And one of the men that was hunting with us said, "Ha! You couldn't get me to shoot that gun. That thing is so rusty on the inside and nasty, it'd probably knock your arm off. Might even kill you." Uncle Joe had been in the military, and he knew guns. He opened it up, looked down. He said, "Well, it's not that bad, you know." He shot it a couple of times. He says, "Doesn't kick any more than any other gun." Well, you'll never get me to shoot that gun, you know, these guys. So my father looked at my brother, who was 13, due to get a gun. "Carl, if you want that gun, you can have it, $10. Well, my brother knew he was due to get a brand new shotgun from Sears, $40, you know, shiny, new 12 gauge. And he kind of believed those guys. He thought that'd probably kick your arm off. And it had a long barrel, and he wouldn't shoot that gun. You know, "I don't want that gun. I'm not going to shoot it." Well, I was 9 years old. I saw my chance. You know, I knew that if I would shoot that gun, it was mine. I said, "I'll shoot that gun." "Well, if that kid will shoot that gun, he ought to have it." You know, I had everybody on my side. I didn't care if that gun killed me. I didn't care if I was going to get that gun at age 9. I shot that gun, and Dad bought that for me. He sawed it off. You know, the barrel was about this long, and the stock was about, it ended up about that long, you know, and didn't kick that bad after he finished. And I got to start hunting at age 9 rather than at age 14. So I went out hunting with Uncle Floyd, and Uncle Floyd was Dad's cousin near O'Keene, Oklahoma. And the first hunt I ever went on was with Uncle Floyd to hunt doves. And at that time, we would hunt on little ponds around the area. And in the fall, the birds would migrate from the north down to the south, and they would come through, and they would feed during the day in the fields, and then they would water at a water hole and then roost in the trees overnight. And so you would go hunting at about 5 o'clock, and along about 5:30 or 6, and when it starts getting to be dusk, the birds would fly, and sometimes they would be just unbelievable. They'd be flying in from all directions to drink and then go roost. So we're out there, And I carry my shotgun and a box of shells out with Uncle Floyd, and we walk about 400 or 500 feet into the pasture, and there's a big little pond, little dam and little pond where the cows water. And we sit down, and about 30 minutes later the birds start to fly. There were birds everywhere, just everywhere. I shoot up my box of shells. I've got 6 or 8 birds. Now, we only shot them flying. We never shot a bird sitting on the ground. You know, it was a sport. We ate the birds, and we cleaned them, but you didn't shoot them on the ground. I had 6 or 8 birds. I was pretty pleased with myself, you know. But I'm out of bullets. I'm out of shells. I look at Uncle Floyd. He's got a little wooden box that he's carried, you know. It's got 2 or 3 boxes of shells in it, a bunch of loose shells in the bottom. Uncle Floyd, can I borrow some shells? I'll pay you back, you know. You hunt with me, you bring your own shells. Uncle Floyd, you know. This is Dickie. I'm your nephew. I don't know whether he was I was really a nephew. I think he was my dad's cousin twice removed. I don't know what the relationship was, but anyway, he was the only guy who ever took me hunting, you know, and I loved Uncle Floyd. He would not give me any bullets. Well, I carried a resentment for a long time against Uncle Floyd for not giving me any bullets. But, you know, for the rest of my life, if I go hunting, I carry all the bullets I can reasonably carry. You know, it taught me a lesson that I have never forgotten. So I get into the Army. At the end of conclusion of my internship in Los Angeles, I've got to do 2 years in the Army. That was back in the days when you got drafted.
You got drafted?
Well, I volunteered for the draft, but you did get drafted back then. This was 1961, 62. You know. So you had to go down and sign up and get a grad draft card, and they drafted people. And so I know that I've got to do it, and I haven't arranged for a residency. If you do a residency, they will defer your draft till you finish the residency, but then you go into the Army. That's it. And I had worked hard. I'd worked through medical school, worked hard in the whole time, and I was worn out. I wanted to rest, and I wanted to get the military out of the way. You know, do my 2 years. So I went down and volunteered for the draft, and the guy asked me one question: "Are you?" I said, "I don't want to be in Fort Riley, Kansas doing."
You didn't do it to pay for college? Or
No.
No. Okay.
I don't want to. I'd like to go overseas. I said, I don't want to be stuck in Fort Riley, Kansas, doing hernia exams on recruits. You know, I said, I'll go crazy. I'd like to have overseas duty. I'd like to go overseas. I'd never heard of Vietnam or anything like that. And he asked me one question: "Are you willing to go to jump school? If you're willing to go to jump school, I can guarantee you overseas duty." Sure, sounds like kind of fun, you know. And so, you know, he signs me up, and I finish my residency and or my internship, and go back. I'm living in Houston at that point, and I'm assigned to first of all to go to Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio for 6 weeks and learn about how to handle gunshot wounds, and learn how to you know, wear military uniform and march and stuff like that. We even crawled under gunfire, under machine gun fire, at about this height, and we'd crawl underneath it and use a compass and a few basic things. A lot of medical stuff, what bullets do at high speed, to tissues and how to handle that. So anyway, I do that, and then I go to Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and I go to a little Quonset hut, Quonset hut 459 or something like that. I get there, and there's no one in the Quonset hut except one sergeant behind a desk. And there's some rooms over there for examinations and an area for other, shots and stuff. But there's no one there. And I walk in and say, I'm Captain Geis. I'm reporting for duty. And the guy says, well, Captain, we don't have anything for you to do. Go to a room over here and I'll let you know when you can go. And I said, well, what's going on? Where is everybody? He won't talk to me. He says, I'm sorry, you don't have a security clearance. Well, it was the Cuban Missile Crisis. And everybody was getting ready to go into Cuba, and they were off somewhere behind concertina wire barrier, hidden, getting ready to take off. For 3 days, I go to work every day. Nobody there. Nobody will talk to me. Nobody will tell me what's going on. So about the third day, the sergeant behind the desk says, Doc, I've got a patient for you. And so this is my very, very first patient after I'm a real doctor. I've got my degree and my license, and I'm a real doctor, and I finished my internship, and I'm going to see patients. And this guy walks in, he's a sergeant. He's got lots of stripes on his sleeve, and I say, Sergeant, what seems to be the problem? And he looks at me and says, I've got malaria. Well, I didn't say this out loud, but I immediately thought, come on, fella, you give me your symptoms, I give you the diagnosis. You're taking all the fun out of this. Besides, I've been a doctor now as an intern for a year, and I've never even seen a case of malaria, much less, what makes you think you can? I didn't say any of this now. What makes you think you have malaria? But I was kindly asked, well, why do you think that you have malaria? He said, well, I just came back from Laos. Laos? I've never heard of a place called Laos, And he says, I have chills and fever every 3 days. Well, I immediately think, well, that's somewhere way over there where malaria probably does exist, and chills and fever every 3 days, that's classic malaria. And I say, Sergeant, I think you have malaria. Well, because we weren't allowed to go to the hospital, because they didn't like it that we did not have to take call, because we had to be ready to go at any time, and so they couldn't say, well, next month you'll be on the ER, and next month after that you'll do OB-GYN. No, we didn't have to go to the hospital at all. We just went to classes. We'd go to jump school and had all kinds of schools to go to, but as a doctor, I didn't ever go to the hospital. So I said, you have to go to the hospital to get treated for this. I can't do anything. But anyway, about the next day, everybody shows up, and it was a Cuban Missile Crisis, and they explained to me why they were gone. And so, but there was still nothing to do, because all these guys were special forces, and they had what we call a picket fence profile. It meant they'd say, lungs, heart, feet, hernias, eyes, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1 picket fence profile. They were all healthy as horses, and we didn't see families at the hospital. We had nothing to do but go to classes. So I did go to jump school. And I came home from jump school, and one guy could run the whole clinic, because all they were doing was giving shots. They'd have 40 guys lined up, and they'd give them shots for all these various diseases and getting them ready to go overseas. But no one was ever sick. Once in a while someone would have a cold, or but we didn't even see appendicitis. So anyway, then after I came back from jump school, and they said, well, we don't have anything for you to do, but we're having a free fall parachute school next week. Do you want to go to that? So the week after I got back from jump school, I went to free fall parachute school. Well, I mean, talk about fun, you know. Free fall, jump from 21,000 feet and fall for, I mean, you know, you pay big bucks to do that. Now in the Army, it's free. And, you know, I had investigated in the military when I got in what the dangers were of parachuting. The previous year on Fort Bragg in North Carolina, there had been some 30 deaths from automobile accidents, young kids, you know, 80,000 troops driving around and getting a little drunk maybe or something, and a bunch of them had died. Nobody had died jumping out of an airplane. They're very safe.
Yeah.
There are a few sprained ankles, maybe a broken bone or two, but in general it's very safe. And so anyway, I'd investigated that, and I thought, well, this is pretty safe. If this is safer than driving a car, you know, that's a good deal. So I went ahead and did that, and then went to the Special Warfare School. 3 months, you know, of learning how to, 6 weeks of learning how to fight a guerrilla war, and 6 weeks of learning how to defend against a guerrilla war. And amazing information. We did high explosives. I used C4. We go out and blow up steel beams and things like, you know, you'd place them down to blow up a bridge or something like that. I mean, parachuted into the swamps of Georgia for 2 weeks. Wandered around the country. You know, you had to carry your own food. Anyway, it was very intensive training. Now, one of the funniest things that happened.
You have to arc to the Uncle Floyd story.
I do have to pass up on some of this stuff. Okay, so I after that's all over, after I've done a year at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and been trained for most of the time, I go to Okinawa, and then get sent to Vietnam. Now, when I go into the Vietnam, you know, you go in without anything. You know, you've got a suitcase, a duffel bag full of some clothes, but that's it. And get in, and they say, okay, Doc, do you want to carry a weapon? You're going down to this Soc Trang air base in South Vietnam. This is Tan Son Nhut Air Base in Saigon. Do you want to carry a weapon, Doc? And I said, you bet. I'm from Oklahoma. You shoot at me, I'm going to shoot back. What do you want to carry? You want to carry a pistol, shotgun, rifle? You can have. We got all these weapons. You can have whatever you want. And I said, well, you know, what's the newest weapon on the market? It's the AR-15. It's very light. The gun with 100 rounds of ammunition is no more, not heavier than the old style M1 rifle that was carried in World War II. I said, perfect, I'll take that. How much ammunition do you want to carry? All of a sudden, the lesson Uncle Floyd taught me about, you know, running out of ammunition, I said, how much can you carry? Because if I'm going to be getting shot at, you know, it's even more important than dove hunting, you know. And he said, well, I can give you a web belt with 3 packets on it, 3 little things. Each one carries 3 clips of ammunition. You can tape 2 together, put them in your gun. That gives you 20 clips, 20 rounds each clip. That's 400 rounds of ammunition. Perfect. You know, that's just enough. I mean, you know, as soon as he said, how much ammunition do you want to carry? You know, it's ding, 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 Uncle Floyd, Uncle Floyd, you know. Well, I go down to Soc Trang, and I'm actually have been sent to Vietnam because of the doctor who was in this air base, small air base down in South Vietnam, had gotten sick or had problems at home. But anyway, he'd been sent home, and they needed a replacement, and they didn't have one for a while, and they just borrowed one from Special Forces, and I was it. And so I go down, and I'm there for about 2 months, and then the replacement comes. And when I get ready to leave the air base, I go to the major, who's the commandant of the air base, and I say, Major, you know, my replacement has come. Is an Air Force doctor who I never even saw or met. I need orders to go back to Okinawa. And he looks at me and he says, "You're Army. This is the Air Force. We don't write orders for Army people. You're on your own." I'm on my own? Yeah, get out of here. Go. You know, we'll put you on the next helicopter back to Saigon. I thought, golly, no one knows where I am. They don't know I've been relieved up in Okinawa. This guy just came, you know. There's no communication between the Air Force and the Army. Hell, I'll just go to Paris. You know, stay there till my duty's up and go back to Okinawa and show back up. Well, you know, I knew I couldn't do that, but I kind of have the feeling they would have never known, you know, that I was, of course I wouldn't have orders to fly, but anyway. So I go back to Saigon, and lo and behold, the guy who had been my commander immediately before I went to Vietnam was in Saigon now as a B detachment commander, Colonel Call. So, you know, I go to him, and you know, I say, "Hi, I'm headed back to Okinawa." And he said, "Well, why don't you stay around and work for me for a while?" Well, I knew that, you know, this was duty in a war zone, although we weren't considered as troops. There were no American troops. There were advisors in Vietnam at this time, but no troops were in Vietnam. And I knew that if I was working for the colonel who had been commanding me up in Okinawa, they wouldn't arrest me or do anything bad to me. So I said, okay, you know, I said, what do you want me to do? So he said, well, I'd like you to go out to this base and see what the problem is. They have been there for 6 weeks, and for the last month, half of them at any one time have been in the hospital with diarrhea and vomiting and sick as a dog, and have had to come back to Saigon. He says, go out there and find out what's wrong. So I go out to this base, and you know, everything seems to be normal. They're boiling their water and cooking their food and eating, you know, everything seems to be normal. And then I noticed that one of them has got a soft drink and he's drinking it on ice. And I say, where are you getting the ice? Oh, we get it down in the village, down here. And I said, you know, they're getting the water out of the river down there. It's got shit in it, you know. I mean, it's contaminated. You can't boil ice, you know. You can boil your water, but you can't boil the ice. And I said, you know, you can't eat ice with your soft drink. Well, you guys up in Saigon have it easy. It's tough down here. It's hot. I mean, it's hot. And, you know, and the way I have it figured, this is the captain speaking, the way I have it figured is the people that live here, they don't have any problem with diarrhea and vomiting and all that kind of stuff, GI problems. The way I have it figured is that, you know, we'll be sick for a while, then we'll get over it, and we'll be immune. And, you know, I looked at him and I said, you know, I think that probably some of these people haven't had a solid stool in the last 20 years, you know. They're probably sick all the time. You can't do it. You know, this is not Army training. Well, we're going to do what we have to do, and, you know, you can shove it. So I went back to the colonel and I said, this guy's smarter than the U.S. Army. He is not going to obey the rules. And this is what the problem is. Well, he didn't say anything immediately, but about 2 weeks later he came to me and he said, I want you to write up your report that you told me. He said, this guy is not qualified to be a detachment commander, a captain of an A detachment. He made a emergency call for emergency resupply of ammunition at midnight last night. That means we're under attack and we're out of ammunition. We landed a helicopter on that hilltop and where that camp is at midnight. Very dangerous. No lights, you know. We thought we were going to get people killed, that they were being attacked. And he said there was nothing going on. They just, you know, we were going to have an emergency resupply of ammunition. And there were about 300 Vietnamese troops. Each one of these camps had 12 Americans and 300 Vietnamese. And he said, you know, you can't do that. He just doesn't. He's a captain in the Army, and he doesn't seem to know anything. You know, I'm going to relieve him of duty. Now, you get relieved of duty at that level, that's the end of your career in the military. You'll never make major. You'll never get advanced after that. And so anyway, he said, you write it up. And he said, well, why don't you go to this other place over here? So I began to visit all these different special forces camps all over the country. And about the second or third one that I visit, he shows up. The colonel shows up at this thing.
That same guy?
Same guy, the colonel. And you know, he goes out to this camp. I'm there, and I'm not really doing anything. You know, I'm just kind of looking around. And so I'm there a day or two, and we eat, and then they say, come back here at 7 o'clock, we're going to have a briefing. I go back at 7. The camp closes at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or something like that. So we go to this briefing, and they said, you know, we're having people drop mortars in this camp every once in a while. Every couple of weeks they'll drop half a dozen mortars into camp. And so we have decided that we're going to surround this little village that's about a mile or two down the road here. We think they're sleeping there at night, and the people in this village are kind of supporting them. And we're going to surround this village at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And we know every person in that village. We find an extra 5 or 6 guys there. They're Viet Cong. And so, you know, so we're going to surround it at midnight. We'll leave here at about 10 o'clock, and we'll walk surround the village. And at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, we'll go in the village and count the people and identify them. So come back at 9 for a final briefing. Bring your weapon. Bring your. I had a rucksack of medical supplies, and we'll be ready to go at about 10 o'clock. So I show up at 9 o'clock, and I walk in this room, and you know, everybody is there. and the captain, he has a pistol and an extra clip in his pocket. Another guy has got a shotgun with a pocket full of shells. Another guy has an AR-15, clip in the AR-15 and a clip in his pocket. Another guy has got a Thompson submachine gun, which I've never seen before, and an extra clip in his pocket. And I show up, I've got 400 rounds of ammunition, as well as a rucksack full of medical supplies. I'm the only guy that's carrying a bunch of weight, and my AR-15, and they laughed at me. Doc, we're just going downtown. There are no concentrations of troops around here. We know that. We go to town every day, you know. We're not fighting a battle. We're just going to surround this. Well, I was embarrassed, you know, and it laughed at me. I actually went back and I took off 2 of those 6 packs. So I only had 300 rounds of ammunition, not 400, you know, but I was carrying weight. They weren't. So anyway, 10 o'clock, we go back, meet up, we take off and walk out. Unbeknownst to me, they had, for the last couple of weeks, every night they would send out an ambush patrol. They had set an ambush up around the camp, and you know, if the people who were lobbing mortars in show up, everybody knew you didn't come to around that camp at night. You know, you weren't supposed to. That was prohibited. They'd be shot. You know, and they sent out an ambush patrol that night, but they didn't tell them that we were coming out, because they knew that there were Viet Cong in the camp, people who were you know, and well, they didn't know, but they suspected that there were, and that if they knew that we were going to make an attack, they would sneak off and warn those people not to come around. So anyway, they sent out an ambush patrol, but they didn't tell them what we were going to do, and they told them to take the ambush patrol out behind the camp. But since they didn't tell them what we were going to do, it was a Vietnamese, probably lieutenant or maybe a sergeant that they had given their instructions to. He just went out right where we were going to walk and set the ambush up about 100 yards away from where we were going on the road. You know, just easy, no problem. Nobody will know what we're doing. We'll just go out at night, come back in the morning and say we set the... So anyway, so we leave camp, we walk about 100 yards or 200 yards or something, walk right into our own ambush. Well, all hell breaks loose, you know. It's tat, 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 boom, tat, 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 tat. Lasts about 15 seconds. I don't remember how long it lasted. It seemed like a little, probably longer than it really did. I remembered they taught us Rogers Rangers, which Rogers Rangers were something from the 1800s or 100 years before, and it was when you're attacked, you kneel down, crouch down, hide behind a tree. Man, I was on my belly behind a tree in about 4 seconds, and I remember Colonel Call. I saw him walk by, and he was headed right towards the ambush, and I thought, that son of a bitch, if he can do it, I can do it. And I fell in behind him, and so anyway, it was all over in 15 seconds. They figured it out, and actually two people got shot. A Vietnamese kid got a bullet through the soft part of his leg here, didn't hit the bone, and one American got a bullet through his cheek, which I think made him deaf, probably for life. But anyway, it was a sad deal. But they had not sent an American with that ambush patrol. They should have made sure that that they were going to go to the right place. Well, anyway, I couldn't do anything for him. I put a bandage on and called a helicopter in, and they hauled him off to Saigon. But the colonel gave me kind of the ultimate compliment. You know, he said, "Guys, you know who I started looking for when all that broke loose? You were the only guy with any ammunition. I started looking for you." He said, "If you want to be an A detachment commander, I will give you an A detachment."